Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Morton. My pronouns are she, her. I am the artist and studio manager here at Baltimore Clayworks. We are thrilled that you all have joined us. I would like to acknowledge that I am joining from my office located on Piscataway and Susquehannock land, currently known as Baltimore, Maryland. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual studio tour given today by Wayman Scott. He is our Embark Fellow. Wayman's solo exhibition will be from July 6th through August 24th. Please come join us for the opening on July 6th from 6 to 8. For more information about our artist talks, please visit our virtual library at baltimoreclayworks.org. I will now turn it over to Wayman.
Good evening, folks. I'm so glad to be here with you tonight and join you. So I am, as Rebecca mentioned, the Embark Fellow. I've been at Baltimore Clayworks since about January 2020 when I took my first course. During the daytime, I work for Gilchrist and GBMC. Gilchrist is a local hospice, and GBMC Healthcare is a hospital system. When I started at Gilchrist, I was a chaplain and eventually became a counselor, a licensed counselor, and served as a grief counselor before going into diversity, equity, and inclusion. Why do I mention that? Because I think that your journey, your path, it can dictate, it can influence some of your art and the work that you do. And in my case, that is very much true. So tonight, I'm going to just show you my space, and I'm going to show you some of my earlier pieces and some of my larger pieces and my newer pieces leading up to my show, Earth and Light. So this is a 12 by 12 space that we have. The residents here at Baltimore Clayworks, we get a 12 by 12 space. This allows us to build big and to explore our artistic expression. Early on, when I started at Baltimore Clayworks, I was always drawn to the portrait art. So I came into ceramics from a background of a portrait artist. So I did some, a few commissioned pieces as a young person, and moving into ceramics, some of that ability to create portraits of people still exists. So one of my earlier pieces here is of Congressman Elijah Cummings. I came to Clayworks shortly after he died. For those of you that are not in the Baltimore area, he was a well-respected civil rights activist and hero, and a beloved congressman representing Maryland. And I found myself dipping into some of my own culture by exploring some of the heroes of the past that have been able to pave the way for me to be here now as a Black man in Baltimore City. I don't think I would be sitting here right now if it were not for people like Congressman Cummings, like Frederick Douglass, and all of the civil rights and equity activists that came before me. So I try to lend credence to that by creating these portraits. I had several portraits in my first solo show, Earth and Life, and it was the focus of the lives of people who changed history. And it was more of a spotlight on them, right? More of a spotlight on what they did, for this country, for this world. As some of my, and I'll show you a couple pieces here. This is a life-size bust, a slightly over life-size bust of Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist. And when I would look at pieces of his, sculptures of him, oftentimes it would be the elder statesman. Yes, there are plenty of portraits and photographs of the young abolitionists, but not a whole lot of sculptures. And I wanted something that young people that are aspiring to do something meaningful in the community and in their lives, I want them to look at another young person. So I thought it was important not to sculpt the elder statesman who has achieved his dreams, but I wanted to sculpt the young abolitionist, the one who is the fugitive, formerly enslaved person, the one that is, had escaped from freedom, the one that is fighting and working toward emancipation, the one that is striving for his goals. So I wanted to show that, and I wanted to highlight that. Here we have another piece. This is when I started doing a slightly smaller scale. This is Mother Mary Lang. Mother Mary Lang was the founder of the Oblate Sisters and St. Francis Academy. She immigrated from Haiti, and she started an African American order of nuns, the Oblate Sisters, and she also started a school. Now, her school that she started in the early 1800s is one of the oldest Catholic schools in in America. You know, she started the school because of segregation, and in the 1830s, you know, Black people weren't even seen as human, let alone given the opportunity to be educated and you know have access to reading and skills. So she started this school to teach a young African American children how to read. And Maryland was a slave state at the time, so it was extraordinarily courageous. I think about some of the civil liberties and protections we have now, and I think of this petite woman who immigrated from another country. I'm sure French was her native language, and she did these incredible things in the face of adversity, and her legacy still exists today. So early on, I was very much so about highlighting that, but I began to study more of the work of people like James Earl Reed, a sculptor who crafted the Billie Holiday piece in Baltimore City. I studied some of the work of Finney Bagwell, a world-class sculptor who graduated from Morgan State University here in Baltimore. And I studied the work of August Rodin. And as I did that, I found myself stepping more into the place of narrative, and not just a narrative based off of who a person is, but a narrative that can show elements of their life, a narrative that shows that, you know, these people of the past and even people of today, they are first and foremost people, right? And they have their routines, they had the things that they do. And Mother Mary Lang is a perfect example, because you see her stepping into this, whereas Frederick Douglass and Congressman Cummings were busts. Mary Mother Lang is sitting in a chair, and she has a school book open, and in the school book, she's going over it. And you have to think that there were probably students or young people or children sitting around her, learning how to read or reading the scriptures with. And then I started, moving more into still historical pieces, but pieces that are symbolic of action. So this piece right here is Joe Gans, the first boxing champion, the first Black boxing champion, born and raised right here in Baltimore, Maryland. And the Veterans Boxing Association and the Friends of Joe Gans, those two organizations are actively raising money for a bronze piece of him. So we want to memorialize him, so people know that there is such greatness that comes in their lineage of Baltimore, Maryland. And then I moved more into Impressionism, right? So I want to show what is the story of everyday people, and I wanted to put myself more into my work. So I have a piece that I am working on now called Job's Lament. And in this piece, people that are Christian or are Jewish or are Muslim know the story of Job, this allegory of a righteous and pious person. And then he lost everything. He lost his children. And the narrative reads that they died in an earthquake. He lost his health. He lost his possessions. He lost everything. And the book, it depicts him as, in some ways defensive, but in other ways there's the stoicism. But I wanted to create a piece that brings emotion into that. What would somebody be like if they lost everything in a moment? What would somebody be like if they found out that they lost all of their children, they lost their family, everything that they hold dear? But if you look at Job, he is on his knees and he's baring his chest. The narrative says that he ripped his cloak as a sign of grief, but I have him literally ripping his chest open to show his broken heart. And to show earth and light, that's what it's going to be about. It's going to be about emotions. It's going to be about people expressing themselves in times of joy or difficulty or dramatic situations, because these are things that people in everyday life face. You might not relate to being a historic person, but you can relate to pain. And when I was a grief counselor in hospice, so often I would hear people try to step away from the grief or say, well, I shouldn't be sad. I should be grateful for the time I had with them. But no, you're sad. And you're sad because you lost your mother, you lost your father, you lost your sister, your son, your brother. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to honor your grief. And earth and life is about facing these emotions, these vivid, powerful emotions that impact our actions, impact our well-being, impact our health, and highlighting them and lifting that up. If I were to take the head off, there is a cavity in here, and in this cavity, a puck light will go. A puck light will go, and it will be red, shining through. So you see that his heart is broken, but his heart is represented by light. His emotion is represented by light. And I'll be using both the ceramic as a medium, but light as a medium as well. Earth and light. What keeps you grounded? That's what I think of when I think of the earth. I think of the base, the substance of a sculpture. I think of ourselves, right? Earth. And then what is your light? What's your inspiration? That spark, that hope, that thing that keeps you going. And both of those elements are represented. And when I think of myself, I think of what keeps me grounded, right? What are some of the fundamental elements of Wayman? What does it mean to be Wayman? Wayman is middle-aged African American male Catholic who lives in Baltimore City. Wayman is a dad. Wayman is a son. Wayman buried a mother. Wayman has worked in ministry or healthcare in various parts of his life. Wayman works for Gilchrist. So that's who Wayman is. But the other part of Wayman that I wasn't as focused on was being neurodivergent. Neurodivergent is a term that refers to people that might be dyslexic or ADHD or OCD or dysgraphic or autism or what have you. There's a number of things that would classify someone as thinking differently than those around them, than neurotypical people, and functioning differently. And I embraced, my own ADHD and came to terms with it and was diagnosed with it, later in life. And by embracing that part of myself and the emotions that came along with it, I was able to find community and find support. And I found out that a good chunk of my own colleagues at Gilchrist and GBMC are also somewhere in the space of neurodivergence. So we all decided to band together and form an employee resource group. But that is part of who I am. So this show is going to focus on equity, and it's also going to talk about my own journey on neurodivergence, which is not talked about. I can talk about the experience of racism, the experience of racial inequity or injustice, and there is a strong context for that. And there are many people that came before me that focus on that. And that's why I focus on it. However, when it comes to neurodivergence or being ADHD or dyslexic or dysgraphic or autistic or what have you, or OCD, that's not talked about that often. There's not even a context for that in a lot of spaces. So I'm trying to change that. When you think about art, art is a way to put a mirror up to society and show them themselves, right? So there are people that are neurodivergent that are all around us. I've heard like 20% of the population, right? So it's a way to highlight that. And another piece in my show is right here, the girl who danced in the rain. And it is a sculpture of my daughter, and she's dancing in the rain. But the idea of dancing in the rain, what do you do when it rains? What do most people do? They bundle up, they run for cover, they hide, they use umbrellas. But dancing in the rain is something that might give the girl that dances in the rain, some measure of peace or excitement or stemming or what have you. And it's different. So it's there to highlight one of those key differences. And I'm also working on two other neurodivergent focused pieces. So please, come on July 6th and check that out. Because it's on July 6th, I also saw this as an opportunity to build a piece that focuses on the 4th of July, right? 4th of July is, I think, that Thursday. I imagine most people are going to be off on a Friday, they're off that Monday. So I wanted to do something that would commemorate, in some way, the American Revolution. And if this were 3 years ago, I might have done a bust or a sculpture of someone. But being more confident and stepping into more of an impressionist frame, I wanted to do a piece that showed the emotion. And in my reflection, in my study, in my research, addicts, Christmas addicts kept coming up. And I noticed that when I spoke to people about Christmas addicts, a lot of people didn't know who he was, right? And I would ask, I'm not going to ask for a poll, but I would be very curious to see how many people on this call today know who Christmas addicts is. How many people on this call today know that it was a Black man who was the first person to die, to give his life in the American Revolution, right? And this was his death or his martyrdom was used by some of the framers of the Constitution as a reason or as ammunition and support to go forth with the revolution. And Dr. King has even referenced Crispus Attucks. So I wanted to do a piece of on him. And this is quite different than what I did with Benjamin Banneker, Congressman Cummings, or Frederick Douglass. Number one, I was talking to Rebecca, what the residency director here, and I was talking to her, and I was like, Rebecca, I think this is the first historical piece that wasn't in some way, shape, or form rooted in Baltimore City. And I remember doing a piece for the Archdiocese of Blessed Francis Sealos, but he was part of the Archdiocese of Baltimore, very much tied in to Baltimore. So this piece right here, you have Crispus Attucks, and he's standing at the front of a large crowd, and the people behind him are showing different emotions. And the long and short of it is, the Boston Massacre that happened in the early 1770s, when several Bostonian colonists were killed and shot dead by some of the British authorities of the time. Crispus Attucks was one of the people leading a protest, leading a charge against unfair treatment, a lack of access to jobs, representation, taxation without representation, and all of the barriers that stood in the way of quality of life. There was a scuffle, and a Bostonian got beaten up, and Crispus Attucks and some of the other men, they're like, we're not having this. No, we're going to go down there, give them a piece of my mind. So in the piece, they actually have clubs in their hands because it was more common for the Bostonians and some of the British to fight. And the context there, Boston was occupied by the British Army, and some of the British soldiers were moonlighting for jobs, and they were taking jobs away from some of the Bostonians that were just trying to make ends meet, right? So the jobs that they had, I think Attucks was a whaler, he was a dock worker, he was a sailor. But a lot of the jobs people had now is threatened by this extra competition and by people that are probably already getting paid by being British soldiers. So yeah, they took issue for that as if it was taking food out of their children's mouths. So they came down and they downtown, and they were going to have this brawl, and they had their sticks and clubs, and they were going to fight. And this happened, according to some historians, like Chris Bonner from University of Maryland. These fights would happen, right? Again, and again, it was commonplace. But that night of the Boston Massacre, it was different, right? Because the authorities were called, guns were pointed, and an order was given. to fire on people that were only armed with clubs, snowballs, and stones. So I wanted to think about the context. So if the context was that people were going to go down and have a scuffle with some of the British, and they've done that before, there might be something almost routine about that. But what were they thinking in the moment, right? The moment where they saw that, no, it's not going to be like other days. No, my life is coming to an end, right? What would be in their mindset, right? So this piece captures that it's a commentary, that moment right before the guns were fired, when people see the guns. And I have a range of emotions here. And I have resolve, I have shock, I have anger, I have determination, I have fear and dread, and all of those things that must have come to the people in that moment when they saw those guns drawn, when they gave the order to fire. So, as a counselor who deals or who dealt with deep and powerful emotions, to try to do a snapshot of emotions that people might give when they're nearing the end of their life was something that I think is important to convey, because it honors, once again, it honors emotions and feelings and recognizes those feelings. So in my study, in my research into Rodin, I saw a piece called the Baghras of Kali. And this referenced a war in France, the town of Kali, and I think it was a 100-year war, and the town was sieged, and finally King Edward said, "You know what? I'm going to kill the whole town unless you take 6 of your most prominent citizens and bring them out with a sackcloth and ropes around their neck to be executed." And the town sent these 6 people out, and in the late 1800s, the town. So this is hundreds of years later, right? So the town wanted to do a commission of this, honoring these people, and they wanted to show these stoic, heroic, fearless people willing to sacrifice themselves for the town, and they wanted Rodin to sculpt that and to build that. But being the impressionist that he was, he didn't want to just to show people triumphant. No, he wanted to go into the root of it. So you look at this piece and you see people with all sorts of emotions, people with multiple emotions in their face. And I thought that he captured that in a very profound way that speaks to the reality of what emotions and stress, and trauma can do to us. And that was a major influence in my piece here. This piece will also have light be involved, have light involved in this, and there would probably be some red and blue and white lighting coming up out of the piece to symbolize the 4th of July element. This piece right here, the girl who plays in the rain. I am, thrilled to say that I am collaborating with a former teacher of mine, Emily Lamb, and she's a former resident here at Playworks, and she is a master glass blower, and she's revolutionizing how you combine those 2 forms. But she's going to work on the base and help make splashing water out of glass. And when she does this, I'll put a light underneath it, some bluish hued light to symbolize and emulate water. But earth and light is going to have both of those things. And another part that I did realize too is that, air can also be an element. Wind can be an element. So the girl that plays in the rain, her coat and her hair, it's blowing. So not only is she in the rain, but the rain blows, and the wind, it could make it cold and more damp and more uncomfortable for maybe someone that is neurotypical. This piece here, it's hard to see the detail at home, but you'll see it on the 6th, I hope. So, but the wind is blowing almost against them. You see people's hair blowing backwards. You see a young boy climbing to the top of a barrel, and his flag is going backwards. You see the cloaks and the coats, and the scarves, the capes, everything is going backwards because the pressure is on them. This wind is going against them in that moment, right? So they're feeling and they're experiencing the pressure. And I wanted to use wind as a way to symbolize that as I step more into a narrative form. Do a narrative form, you want to use all of the resources available to you to help tell that story. Being expressive and using more emotions in my work, I really relied heavily on, in terms of technique, Philippe Farid. He was, or he is, a prolific sculptor and ceramicist um, who captures not only the human form but the tone and feeling and remarkable ways. I think it was 2021 or maybe 2022. I won the Mary Nyberg Award. It was and that's an award for rising newer artists who win this award, and they go someplace and they get further educated in ceramic and art. So during the pandemic, of course, I wasn't going to go someplace, but I did bring stuff in, and I ordered just a bunch of books of Phil Farid that and other human figurists that really went into expressions and faces and raw, strong, powerful emotion. So that research and that guidance that I got from the Nyberg Award is still with me now. So and before I close, I just wanted to show you a little bit of my space. Over here, I have pieces that are either done or in progress. Over here, I have a shelf, and it doesn't look organized, but it is organized. I have a shelf with cupboards that have underglaze or paint or mason stain for the coloration that I put in my clay. I also have a bin right next to that of armature wire, because some of the pieces and the shapes of the pieces, it's important to have an under wire frame. The Joe Gans piece, I use underwire to build him out to keep him stable enough as he dried. Also, on the shelf beneath that, I have grapples and hooks. So when I need to cut boards or what have you, and then I'm gonna show you this. It's an important part of ceramics, so important that I had to give it its own bin. And these are the plastic sheets that you put over your pieces when they are drying, so they dry out nice and evenly. And I thought it would be prudent to actually have a bin full of plastic sheets, although a lot of the plastic sheets are all around my space right now, but controlled chaos. And then of course, I have a lot of my clay. And in closing, I started with clay and I'm ending with clay. So I have here just loads and loads of clay and ceramic, loads and loads of clay and ceramic. And clay is a big part of my anchor, a big part of who I am. Like I said, earth and light, it's all about, what keeps you grounded. What is the solid foundation on which you stand? And light, what is that spark? What gives you hope? What gives you energy? So I hope that on July 6th, you can explore this journey with me, and many of you have thought about this, right? You probably have ideas. I know where I'm grounded. I know what my light is. And some of you haven't thought of that as much. And there's a whole slew of people in between. But no matter what camp you're in, if you ask yourself, what keeps you grounded? And what is your light? You've already won, because you're thinking in ways to dig deeper. And I hope we can dig together, and I hope to see you there on July 6th. Thanks a lot.